Good morning, everyone. I am Amy Firestein, she, her pronouns, and I am excited to share leadership of today's service with the Reverend Bran Lennox. We are glad you are choosing to join us today for this virtual service while our sanctuary continues to get a much anticipated facelift. Whoever you are, wherever you live, whomever you love, whatever you do for a living, you are welcome at the Unitarian Church of Harrisburg. We invite you to join us for coffee hour following this morning's service here on this Zoom link, so you don't need to leave to go to another meeting. I invite you to take this moment to hold our space here as sacred and keep yourselves muted unless you are one of our speakers today. Online or in person, we are very grateful that you are sharing this time with us together.
Gather the Spirit, harvest the power. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our trials in this light appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, harvesting all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun, winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then, gather in hope, compassion and strength, gather to celebrate once again.
We have chosen to bring ourselves here to this sanctuary today to gather as a community of faith. We join together in solidarity as a covenanted people who are drawn together by the promise of connection and the mysterious pull of the unanswerable. As seekers, wanderers, appreciators of nature, and creators of connection, our paths have converged today so that we might become present to the spirit that is worship. And so let us worship together. Each week it is our tradition to light a chalice, which casts a circle of light to hold us all. As we create anew this symbol of our shared faith, let's reflect on these words by Pat Uribe Lichty. We come from many places, along different paths, bringing different truths. We come with different histories and different realities, and yet we come together as one people, with faith that we can use our differences to heal ourselves and each other, to bring wholeness to a fractured world. We come seeking to find community, to find acceptance of who we are in this place. We may find others who are much like us and others who are much different. May our lit chalice remind us that we are a people taught by different stories with many voices, but always one people, working for a world where love creates justice and justice gives birth to peace.
When we gather in community, it's important to remind ourselves and each other of why we are here and what we agreed to try together. Here at UCH, we've decided our goals are to encourage each other, to equip each other with what we need to succeed, and to empower each other to do good things. We renew this promise by reading our covenant together. Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is our gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Today's story is titled A Kid's Book About Unconscious Bias by Wendy Batchelder. Have you ever felt misunderstood without even saying a word? Have you ever felt like someone thought that they understood who you are before they knew anything about you? Have you ever felt that who you are is less important than who people think you are? That is bias. Bias is when someone assumes something about you without even knowing you. Bias can happen because of what someone looks like, where they were born, or what they wear. And this bias can be conscious or unconscious. Conscious bias is when you have assumptions about a person and you know you're making those assumptions, that the bias is intentional and you know you are doing it. And in case you don't know, an assumption is when you think something is true, but you don't have all the facts. You could be wrong. Unconscious bias is when you have assumptions about a person and you don't even know you have, excuse me, and you don't even know you have that bias. It's unintentional and you don't know that you are doing it. When I was a kid, a lot of people assumed that because I was adopted, I was not wanted. But that wasn't true. What was true is that I was wanted by both my biological parents and my adoptive parents. This unconscious bias really hurt me, and sometimes it still does. And I'm a grown up now. Understanding unconscious bias and knowing that we all have it is important, and that's why we're here. By examining our bias, we have the opportunity to move unconscious bias to our conscious mind, and then we can do something about it. We can work on this together. So, how do we dig in? Well, it starts with being curious. When we start thinking about our thoughts, we can understand our bias better. Why do we think certain things about others? Where did these thoughts come from? And what can we do about it? Well, in my example, here's what I learned and did. First, I felt really bad because of what other people said about me, and I let their assumptions become my truth. I listened to the things people said about me instead of correcting their assumptions. If I was there again, now I'd ask, why do you think that about me? Do you know why kids are adopted? I would challenge their assumptions, and then I could begin to share the facts. Learning new information can work to eradicate bias. Facts are facts. They remain unchanged. However, my feelings and their feelings about families could change. And the funny thing is, I assumed that all biological families were wanted, accepted by default, and I felt like they belonged more than I did. And that isn't always the case. Facts are consistent, feelings are not consistent. It's helpful to focus on what we can change instead of what we can't. Feelings exist in the past, present, and future. How did I feel about it then? How do I feel about it now? How might I feel about it in the future? Think about a time when you made an assumption about someone. These are examples of bias. Women love to cook. Men love to drive cars. A tall person must be good at basketball. A person with glasses loves to read. A person who wears dresses must not like soccer. Someone of Indian descent must have been born in India. But what else might be true? All genders can enjoy cooking. Women love cars. A tall person can be interested in any sport, like gymnastics. A person with glasses may prefer to learn by listening. Someone of Indian descent may be from Chicago. You get it, right? By being curious about our thoughts, we can bring the unconscious thoughts to the surface, make them conscious, and learn more about ourselves and others. Doing this gives us the opportunity to make a choice. Do we continue to believe our assumption, or do we seek to understand and challenge our assumptions based on new knowledge? This practice gives us the opportunity to truly connect with people, and that's an amazing thing. When you catch yourself or others making assumptions about someone, consider asking, what else could be true? Stay curious, bringing the unconscious to the conscious, and be open to learning something that you didn't know before. This brings us together instead of separating us further from one another. Imagine how cool that would be. Who knows? Maybe you make you might make a new friend.
So, in high school, I was a proud member of the band, both concert and marching. And, in case you're curious, I played the clarinet. As many of you, like myself, can surely attest to, high school might be the prime time when we all begin to truly fall prey to stereotyping others. I can't imagine there isn't one person attending this service who hasn't at one time or another been put into a stereotypical category or maybe even put someone else into one. In reality, it probably starts in middle school, but it's high school that seems more front and center for making assumptions about each other. Well, as I mentioned, I was in band, and each year in the fall, our primary focus during band time was our marching band repertoire. And what exactly does the marching band do each Saturday? Well, we attended and participated at halftime at the football games. Now, of course, at those games, aside from the marching band, you have cheerleaders and, of course, the football team. Well, during my time in high school, during both my junior and senior years, there was a three-way rivalry. During the games, the band was encouraged to play in the stands and not just at halftime. And of course, the cheerleaders were expected to cheer. But it would happen way too often that as soon as the band decided to pick up their instruments and play a round of tequila in the stands, the cheerleaders would pick up their pom-poms and start a cheer. So, of course, the band liked to get even, and so sometimes when the cheerleaders started to cheer, we'd pick up our instruments and play a rousing bandstand music of some sort. Now, if you remember, I did say that it was a three-way rivalry, so we can't leave out the football players. If they lost a game, they would blame both the band and the cheerleaders, stating that the cheerleaders didn't cheer them on enough, or the band didn't play, or the band played too many times in the stands and distracted them. So basically, it wasn't uncommon for a genuine dislike of anyone who was a cheerleader, football player, or band member, introversially. After all, if you were a cheerleader, you were a snob and cliquish. Football players were jocks who thought they ruled the school, and band members, to be nice about it, were, well, the geeks. Now, to anyone listening now, I don't say any of this to offend anyone who was a cheerleader, a football player, or a fellow band member, because the honest truth is that every one of my peers was a person, an individual, and while, yes, there were a few of the squad who did in fact make my time in high school not so pleasant, it really was just a few of them, and not the entire squad. In fact, when you get to know someone personally for who they are, it shouldn't matter what groups they belong to. It's more about how we treat each other that matters. In fact, one of our star football players played trumpet in the band and was a good friend of mine. I would like to mention that by the time my youngest sister made it to high school, the lead teachers and coaches for the band, football team, and cheerleaders got rid of that rivalry and actually encouraged the band and football players to go to cheer meets, and the football players and cheerleaders were encouraged to attend marching band competitions. My son said to me the other day that I always seem to see the good in people when I first meet them. And that got me to thinking, when did my high school mentality of stereotyping disappear? Or is it that I never truly listened to what others said about someone and instead chose to make my own decisions about that person? Either way, my son is right. I try not to make snap judgments about someone when I first meet them. I want to get to know them first, learn about them. And maybe it does stem from my time in high school when I myself was the victim of biased thinking. That while I had my very close-knit group of friends, who I'm still very close to the point that we get together every summer and have since we graduated college, I still felt isolated walking down the halls, and I don't like the idea of someone else feeling that way. There are some people you instantly click with, and there are others that you don't. It is hard sometimes, though, to put biases aside when you first meet someone. But if we take the time to learn more about the person, we can see who they are. After all, it's always better when we don't judge a book by its cover.
Let's join together now in the spirit of meditation and open our hearts and minds to these words of prayer offered by Katie Steinberg. Spirit of life, love that calls us to love, care that calls us to care, presence that calls us into presence. We give thanks that we have been brought together in this beloved place, this holy virtual sanctuary, this sacred harbor where we bring ourselves as we are in times of sorrow, in times of joy, in times of confusion, in times of fear, in times of clarity, in times of quiet acceptance. In our efforts to pay closer attention to our inner lives, to each other and the world around us, may we notice divine essence today, however this essence expresses itself. May we cultivate presence and awe while we attune to murmurs and shimmers within us and around us, whether it be the spark of a new idea, a vulnerable share from someone we love, or unexpected warmth from someone we don't know. May we continue to attune to what Reverend Howard Thurman called the sound of the genuine within ourselves. May we become quiet enough and still enough to notice the deep call within us that lures us towards what matters most. This call that lures us towards freedom and purpose. We ask for guidance and space and time to do just that, so we can lead the lives we feel most called to live. Today, we remember the people who have paid close attention to us in our lives. These people have loved us into being through the way they witnessed us. The way they attuned to us both strengthened us and transformed us. There may be only one person we think of who has done this for us throughout our lives, and we give thanks to them today. We say, thank you for witnessing me. Thank you for paying close attention to the stirrings in my heart. We also consider someone who may want to be witnessed by us. Perhaps this is someone we haven't been able to make time for, someone we love who dearly wants our attention. May we find a way to say, I'm here with you. I'm paying close attention to the stirrings in your heart. May we continue to cultivate the practice of paying close attention so that more people feel lovingly held in our hurting world. May we meet this moment and all the moments ahead with spaciousness and presence. May we deeply and lovingly witness the person in front of us, beside us, and within us. Amen. And let's share a rare and beautiful moment of stillness together now. Thank you. Now is the time when we engage as a community in the sharing of our joys and sorrows, our concerns and our milestones. When we join together to hold each other in support and in celebration, we deepen our sense of interrelationship. We may find our sorrows eased and our joys magnified. I invite you to share them now. Please remain muted and type your joys and sorrows in the chat box, and we will hold you in love as I read our joys and sorrows aloud for all to hear. Shared or unshared, our hearts join with yours in carrying all that life brings. And while we wait for these joys and sorrows to come up, we also had some joy earlier in the service for our virtual choir. Mary Jean Glick is grateful, says, grateful for our new rescue puppy, Loki. Our guest, who is titled I Smile a Lot, says, I'm learning to make room for myself and truly protect my peace. Corey shares, today is my twin sister's 60th birthday. Happy birthday, Corey and twin. Okay. I see. Oh, not Corey's birthday. Corey's twin sisters. I see. Correction. Hannah Belser shares, I am so thankful that a course of drugs is reducing the back pain that has plagued me for a month. We celebrate that with you, Hannah. We'll take the space of another few peaceful breaths for anybody who is still typing. For all that has been shared and those many concerns we hold deep in our hearts and yet remain unspoken, we journey with each other in love. In thinking about bias this week, I was reminded of a conversation I had some years ago with my friend Natasha. I was griping at some length about someone who I found really irritating. And at some point, Natasha helpfully cut in to make an observation. Now, the phrase that she actually said contains a word that I shouldn't say from the pulpit, even a virtual one. So I'm going to give you a slightly edited version. Right? Natasha said, Ah, you've gone jerk eating crackers. What? You know, jerk eating crackers, as in, look at that jerk over there eating crackers like she owns the place. The jerk eating crackers phenomenon is a memorable and hilarious way of describing how sometimes our dislike of someone causes us to interpret everything they do as malicious, even if their actual actions are perfectly innocuous. This is another example of something our brains developed for helpful reasons, but then it gets taken too far, and we have to intentionally correct it back into balance. If we were living at a time in history when we could regularly expect physical attacks from hostile others, it wouldn't serve us well to pause and evaluate whether an enemy's behavior was threatening or whether they were just eating crackers. This and other forms of bias are the result of the many forms of shorthand that our brains have to do at all times in order to keep up with the onslaught of sensory information we receive every moment of our conscious lives. We receive about 11 million bits of information every second, but the conscious mind is only capable of processing around 50 bits of that 11 million. A lot of guesswork, predictive patterning, and automation go into helping us manage the rest. A reality which might be a little uncomfortable for most of us is that we all automatically sort people into categories based on our immediate assumptions about them. Our subconscious uses these categories to inform our interactions. Are they part of our tribe or from a competing group? Are they probably safe or do they pose a threat? The existence of this type of automatic prejudice is normal and it's inescapable. Everyone has it, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Having someone call your attention to the type of subconscious bias, also known as implicit bias, is not an accusation, it's just information. However, there are parts of this over which we have control. We can educate ourselves and practice becoming aware of our biases. We can give ourselves more data to work with by engaging more deeply with cultures and populations which differ from our own, thereby reducing the guesswork required. Implicit bias is also highly influenced by the stories we're taught by the society around us. Many studies have demonstrated, for example, that regardless of race, all Americans tend to associate negative words more easily with Black faces and positive words more easily with white faces. We can preemptively correct for implicit bias by intentionally increasing our regard for people we've been indoctrinated to perceive negatively and choosing actions which align with this correction. Our negative biases can come from other sources as well. If you had a very bad experience with a tall woman with an Australian accent, you might be a little less inclined to trust tall women and Australians. When we become more aware of our biases, it can be really beneficial to work on identifying their sources. Another common source of bias is the deep beliefs which were ingrained in each of us at a young age. In pastoral circles, we have a useful concept called embedded theology. According to Presbyterian minister and psychologist Carrie Doring, embedded theology consists of beliefs and values instilled throughout childhood. Some embedded beliefs, values, and practices from childhood are left behind. Others exert an unconscious influence and surface under stress. Embedded theologies are those pre-critical and often unexamined beliefs and practices that have become a habitual part of one's worldview and practices. In Unitarian Universalist pastoral training, we use embedded theology to discuss profoundly buried beliefs, which may or may not have anything at all to do with God. In the earliest years of our lives, our parents inhabit the role of God. Our primary authority with singular power over our lives, the messages we learn from our parents and caregivers become engraved on our spirits. Much of this learning happens before we are capable of conscious reasoning, before we even begin forming memories, so it takes some effort to bring it back into our conscious awareness. The impetus for becoming aware of our embedded beliefs is usually some sort of crisis, and the tone of what surfaces tends to be negative. More often than not, we are faced with the daunting task of unlearning these foundational convictions. While embedded theology is most often used to describe the experience of individuals, our congregation and our faith also operate on these types of underlying pre-critical beliefs. Unitarian Universalism struggles in particular with our embedded theology of justice. We Unitarian Universalists tend towards embedded belief that the world is fundamentally fair. We tend to believe that people get what they work for. We tend to believe that the word God can only refer to the guy in the sky, and all organized religion resembles Christianity. We get caught on our subconscious attachment to binaries such as science and faith, helper and in need of help, able-bodied and disabled, harmonic and dissonant. Many of us are influenced by a common 20th century liberal belief that the solution to racism is colorblindness, which can cause a lot of internal confusion when we engage in systemic anti-racism work requiring us to recognize difference in racial experiences. This one goes hand in hand with the embedded belief that everyone is naturally welcome in our congregations. Members of oppressed groups may not feel welcome unless we have done a lot of work to intentionally make space for them, both emotionally and with practical measures. And paradoxically, some of what's involved in making space for marginalized folks is ceasing to tolerate those who would wish harm on them or condone harm to them. Think of it this way. Two people want to participate in our congregation. One of them is openly gay, and the other is aggressively hateful towards gay people. If we tell them both that they are equally welcome, only the second person is actually safe to be here. It is an either-or situation, and not choosing is functionally choosing the person with more power. Coming to terms with these embedded beliefs is a necessary part of the process if we want to move beyond the patterns they are holding us within. It sounds simple enough, but changing a belief is wildly difficult. There's another bias-related phenomenon called belief perseverance. When we are confronted with new information which goes counter to something we believe, we are liable to disregard this new information and continue holding our extant belief. This, too, is healthy and useful to a certain extent. If we changed our understanding of the world every time we are presented with new information, we would be susceptible to believing a lot of misinformation. The more foundational the belief is to our current understanding of the world, the higher the threshold of persuasion becomes in order to motivate change. Sometimes we do realize that a change in worldview is necessary or inevitable, and this can be uncomfortable enough to dysregulate our nervous systems, making the very inner change at hand impossible. Meaningful growth can only happen when we feel safe and resourced. At times like this, it's necessary to find gentle, creative ways to move forward. When I was a kid, I had to employ an indirect method of confronting change so that I could let go of old beliefs. And for a memorable example, here's a confession. I believed in unicorns for way longer than I'd like to admit. I was obsessed with them. On every car ride, I stared unblinkingly out the window, petrified that I would miss my opportunity to glimpse a unicorn among the trees. And it got bad enough that I would sometimes cry with anxiety, afraid that I wasn't well behaved enough for a unicorn to come to me. And the more people tried to tell me that they weren't real, the more I dug in and insisted that they were. When I was around 10 or 11 years old, I quietly, secretly came to the realization that I needed to let go of the unicorns. But I wasn't ready to accept their non existence. So instead of changing my belief directly, I decided I would just not believe either way. I made the commitment to stop thinking about them whenever possible and let the existence of unicorns become someone else's problem. After about a year of this non-committal approach, I had enough distance from the inner conflict that I could comfortably acknowledge that unicorns were fictional. Leaving Catholicism as a teen followed a very similar path for me, as well as leaving behind other harmful beliefs. Sometimes we just need to remove ourselves from having convictions at all for a while until we can get a little more clarity. The good news is that all of these processes get easier with practice. Whether you are trying to let go of a harmful belief system, confront a justice idea outside of your comfort zone, notice your own biases, or just stop assuming ill intent every time a jerk eats crackers, every repetition strengthens your capacity. All it takes is the humility to know that nobody is always or even usually right, and the commitment to let your process take the time that it takes. And don't forget, you don't have to do this alone. One of our most powerful tools is togetherness. Seek support in one another and show up without judgment, mutually recognizing that inner change is hard and every last one of us does have work to do. Let love be your guide as you traverse this unending sacred journey of growth. As you transform yourself, you will transform the world.
The Unitarian Church of Harrisburg is, as always, an intentionally gathered congregation of freely thinking, loving people. The church is created, sustained, and supported by us. Each week, we take up an offering where we ask each other to share money to support the church. We also use half of this money to help a charity which is doing important work to improve the world. For the month of July, we are sharing with Peace Promise. Peace Promise addresses the complexities of sex trafficking in the Harrisburg region by offering outreach and intervention support and training, education and awareness, and economic empowerment for those who have experienced the weight of sexual exploitation. They partner with survivors in their healing process to provide for practical needs like housing and employment, while also addressing emotional support and life skills training to equip survivors to thrive in their journey to freedom. If you wish to contribute online, please visit uchbg.org and scroll to the bottom of the page for options. Your financial support and commitment matter. Please consider giving what you are able.
We dedicate these gifts to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of compassion and action, faith and fellowship, hope and wholeness.
What the Clamorings For by Tracy Robinson Harris. In conversations about the Initiative for Greater Diversity, our Unitarian Universalist Association-wide commitment to become more inclusive, one of the questions that inevitably arose was, what do we want diversity for? What is our motivation? Perhaps it is guilt. Guilt over the injustices of racism, heterosexism, classism. A commitment to diversity would make me feel better, that is, less guilty. Perhaps it is a sense of responsibility to deal with my prejudices and somehow participate in bringing greater justice. A commitment to diversity would hold us responsible, make us do the right thing. Perhaps it is that nagging call to seek wholeness. Given the partiality of all points of view, given the diversity of truth, given our calling to live our lives religiously, given these, a commitment to diversity is nothing more or less than honoring the call to seek wholeness in my life and in our collective life. African-American feminist author teacher Bell Hooks asks the question this way: what is all this clamoring after difference? All the clamoring is seeking wholeness. Guilt leads to angry denial and inaction. Responsibility leads to grudging good works. The call to seek wholeness has room for acknowledging feelings of guilt and anger, frustration, room for accepting appropriate responsibilities, and plenty of room for moving forward personal and communal transformation. All the clamoring is for each person, each perspective, each truth to be granted sufficient respect so that we truly listen to those ideas and allow ourselves to be truly challenged by them. All the clamoring is for us to recognize that our lives are intertwined, so intertwined that each is accountable to the other. Each particular story or truth calls us to accountability, calls me to accountability for my life, my limits, my individual, and our collective transformation. All the clamoring is for truth. I need you. I need you, who you are, the experiences and the perspectives you bring, so that I may know truth beyond my partial truth. All the clamoring is for justice. We need each other and what we can all do together for justice.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through night.
These benediction words come from Jean M. Rickard. We have a calling in this world. We are called to honor diversity, to respect differences with dignity, and to challenge those who would forbid it. We are a people of a wide path. Let us be wide in affection and go our way in peace. Amen. You're invited to stay to enjoy some time of discussion and fellowship and your favorite warm beverage at home. We'll gather